Hello everyone, my name is Christina and my topic is evaluating human activity and ecological sensitivity at Scotsdale Farm. My internal supervisor was Danijela and my external supervisor is Kevin from the Ontario Heritage Trust. Providing an overview of my presentation, first I will discuss the background and objectives, the study area, my methods, results, along with a discussion with any limitations, recommendations, and any acknowledgements. Getting into the background of my study, the ecological and visitor use context, outdoor recreation and hiking are increasing in Canada, adding pressure on ecosystems. Higher trail use can disturb wildlife and damage vegetation, along with leading to invasive species. Wetlands and mature forests are the most sensitive vegetation types at Scotsdale Farm, and there is no assessment linking visitor use patterns to ecological sensitivity. So over the summer, I worked with the Ontario Heritage Trust for my internship, and I was in charge of creating a 10-year land management plan for the property for specifically the natural heritage, and one of my recommendations was to do a trail analysis just because there was a lack of data on this. So my research goes in depth about this and helps provide recommendations to them. My study had three main objectives, the first being determining when and where visitor activity occurs at Scotsdale Farm using vehicle counter and iNaturalist data, understand visitor motivations, frequency of use, and management priorities using on-site questionnaire responses. And then the third being identifying where recreational use overlaps with sensitive vegetation types by integrating ELC and GIS analysis. Getting into the study area, Scotsdale Farm is a 531-hectare property owned by the Ontario Heritage Trust in Halton Hills. The Bennetts purchased the property in 1938, creating a scenic estate. So they added a dam, stone walls, historic barns, and design laneways. The property is rather aesthetically pleasing, and it was really well thought out. There were Arabian horses, and now there are still shorthorn cattle on the property. The property was donated to the Ontario Heritage Trust in 1982, and it's now valued for its cultural heritage, ecological features, and trail network. To provide more context of Scotsdale Farm, these are the ecological land classification vegetation types found. The four highest are forests, swamps, meadows, and agriculture. There are a few savannas, marshes, development, and aquatic systems, but these are the four highest. I created a map of the trail network for Scotsdale Farm, and anything that you see in blue are the main trails. So the dark blue line is the Bruce Main Trail. The lighter blue line is the Bruce Side Trail. So these are commonly used amongst the property, and these are the formal trails. And then as you can see, there are a few footpaths, informal trails. These are shown in dashes along the property. Now I'll be talking about my methods for data collection. The vehicle counter data was provided by the Ontario Heritage Trust. The iNaturalist research grade observations were pulled from online. The visitor questionnaire was completed by me in July 2025, and then ecological land classification data was provided by the Trust along with Credit Valley Conservation, and it was confirmed by me over the summer. As part of my methods, I had to do a sensitivity analysis. The first was ecological sensitivity, so I assigned sensitivity based on ELC type. Wetlands were given a very high rating, forests and savannas were given a high rating, meadows were moderate, and agriculture and development was low. The second was wildlife sensitivity, where I used the iNaturalist data to help with these sensitivity values. So an increase in sensitivity based on species evidence. So I looked at species at risk, sensitive fauna, so turtles, nesting birds, and along with species richness. And then an overall sensitivity value was given. So it was either ranked very high, high, moderate, or low. This is how the rankings looked like for each ELC type. You'll see this put into graphs and visual representations further on in the presentation, but this is just to give you a sense of what it looked like. For this spatial and statistical analysis, I calculated trail length, species counts, and trail density per ELC vegetation type. I mapped hotspots across the property using visitor observations, and I ran various statistical tests comparing off-trail and on-trail species distances. First, I'll be going over my results for the questionnaire findings and the visitor use analysis. Looking at the vehicle counter data, this is the monthly visitation at Scotsdale Farm between 2024 to 2025. The vehicle counters were put up in July 2024 and they were left up for a year until July 2025. There were about 37,500 visitors per year based on this data. The first blue line is what your GPS will take you to when you go to the farm, so that is why it's labeled as public access. And the second one, then the more yellowish greenish color, is local access. So this is something that more of local residents will know about. It's not as frequently visited. Some peaks can be attributed to filming on the property during this time period. So this is why you might see a few peaks, especially in May. October is known for photography, so a lot of people will visit the farm then, hence the peak for that time. These are my visitor questionnaire results. So looking at the regional distribution of visitors, a lot of them, about half, are coming from the Halton Hills area, a good portion are coming from Guelph and Wellington region, and then the remainder are from Peel region, so Mississauga, Brampton, York region, which is Markham, Vaughan area, and then Toronto. Visit frequency of Scotsdale Farm visitors further confirms that there's a lot of local residents using the property, so a lot of people are visiting daily, weekly, monthly. Some are visiting a few times a year, it's their first time, and they're not visiting the property as frequently. Linking back to what I said in the beginning of the presentation, hiking, spending time in nature, dog walking, these are all the primary activities that occur at the farm for visitors. And some key features valued by the visitors are the peaceful natural landscape of the property, the scenic trails, the opportunity to observe wildlife, the farm buildings, and the fact that it's a publicly accessible heritage site. Taking a look at visitor observation hotspots from the iNaturalist data, I just want to be clear that these hotspots are where people are getting out of their cars, they're stopping, they're taking pictures, and they're looking around at the environment. The major hotspots that you see on this map are from the parking lot and dam area, so this is around the center of the property. More towards the southern part of the property, along the Bruce Main Trail, a lot of people are using this area as well, and they're stopping and taking pictures. And then there are a few spots of the northern part of the property as well where people are doing the same. This is a map I created to show the ELC vegetation types with hotspots. So to give you a brief rundown, anything that's in brown is agriculture, anything in blue is aquatic systems, marshes, swamps, so your wetlands. Anything that's in green is your forests and your woodlands. Anything that's more of a light yellow color is the meadows, and then anything in orange is the savanna vegetation types on the property. Now I'll be getting into the results for species distribution. First, we will be looking at plants. I chose wild ginger and trillium to show throughout the property just because it's something that was commonly reported and it's something that attracts visitors a lot of the time. These are commonly found along the main trails of the property and where a lot of the hotspots can be found as well. Looking at the bird species, I chose eastern meadowlark and bobolink because they are the more threatened species on the property. As you can see, bobolink are found in the agricultural field, so a lot of people are stepping out of their car, they're seeing these bird species and they're taking photos. This occurs for eastern meadowlark too. They are found in a lot of the meadows. So they do overlap a lot with the hotspots. Lastly, we will be looking at Midland painted turtle and the eastern redback salamander. A lot of these observations do occur on the main trails, but there are some where people are going off trail into the forest and taking these photos and observations. So it's interesting just to look between the different species, where they're found on trail versus off trail. Now that we have a clear overview of the visitor hotspots and the species distribution, I will be getting into the sensitivity rankings. So forests, swamps, marshes, aquatic systems, and savannas all had very high ratings. Some of the forests had high ratings. Woodlands and meadows had a mixture of high and moderate. Agriculture had a mixture of high, moderate, and low, and then development was low. For the trail statistics, the data was non-normally distributed, so a non-parametric test was used. Species observations occurred significantly farther from the trails than expected, and off-trail distances differed significantly among ELC vegetation types. Looking at off-trail distances by ELC vegetation type, I put together a box plot, and it's very clear that swamps, forests, and agricultural fields have the highest off-trail distances, with swamps going up to over 200 meters off the trail. Forests go just below the 200 meters, and then I know agricultural fields as well are just under 200 meters, and meadows, so people are exploring these vegetation types a lot more. This graph shows trail density by ELC vegetation type, and forests are definitely used the most for trails. There are some higher values for agriculture and swamps, so some of these are being used, but it is very clear that forests are the highest. I know that was a lot of results that I just talked about, so I will be giving a brief summary here. Visitor activity is consistently high, with peaks in the spring and fall, and roughly 37,500 for the 2024 and 2025 year. Most survey respondents were local or regional visitors with frequent repeat use, indicating strong community reliance on Scotsdale for recreation. Hiking was the primary activity, and visitors most valued peaceful natural areas and scenic trails. iNaturalist hotspots showed that visitor observations cluster along major trail corridors, including several sections near sensitive wetland and forest edges. Species of concern overlapped with areas of high visitor presence. Sensitivity mapping showed wetlands and forests held the highest ecological and wildlife sensitivity, with many polygons falling into high or very high categories. Statistical tests revealed that species observations occurred significantly farther off-trail than expected. Off-trail distances varied significantly among ELC vegetation types, and trail density was highest for the forest vegetation type. So overall, visitor pressure is not confined to low sensitivity areas and occurs in high sensitivity areas as well. There are a couple limitations that I feel are important to highlight throughout the study. Some ELC polygons were sliver-shaped, which needed to be considered in trail density values. iNatural observations were biased toward trail and visitor-accessible areas. GPS accuracy of iNaturalist points introduced uncertainty in distance-to-trail results. Vehicle counter data was inflated by filming activity, increasing visitation estimates. Some of the sets could be seen in the photos below, which I think are quite cool. And data was collected in one season, so results do not capture seasonal variability. And the ELC data itself is quite limiting and doesn't show a good overview of the different species found on site. For management recommendations, I focused on actions that directly respond to the sensitive vegetation types and wildlife patterns identified in my analysis. So the first recommendation is closing and restoring informal meadow trails. This is important because species like bobolink and meadowlark are likely nesting in these areas. The second is adding signage at wetland and mature forest edges to help discourage off-trail movement into areas that I classified as very high sensitivity. These vegetation types are the most vulnerable to trampling and habitat degradation. The third recommendation is improving trail design in sensitive zones by adding boardwalks and reinforcing boundaries, which can help protect soils and vegetation while still allowing access. This is especially true for the southern portion of the property, as shown below here. It is definitely a swampier, wetter area, so the trail is widening based on my field observations and site visits. So having a boardwalk there could help significantly. And finally, continuing to monitor hotspots and species observations to support adaptive management. It allows the trust to track whether visitor pressure is shifting and whether additional interventions are needed. And to have a formal inventory of the site, it could help highlight any important species that need to be prioritized, especially in management planning. This is my works cited. Thank you for listening to my presentation, and thank you to Danijela for supervising me and guiding me, all my MFC professors, the MFC 2024 cohort, Kevin from the Trust, along with all internal staff at the Trust. Thank you.